You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our fourth episode of the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series where you can check in for your dose of stigma breaking, humor filling, empowerment building, life hacks and motivation for all of you medically adultish young people. I'm your host, Dominique Vale, the founder of InvisiYouth Charity, and today is another installment of our empowerment and life hacks for invisible illnesses, both physical and mental health. Like I've said, InvisiYouth Charity is all about providing daily lifestyle improvements for young adults with any type of health struggle, both physical and mental, invisible or visible illness, in the forms of our education, advocacy, and fun events. So with the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions being part of our new virtual programming, we are clustering together a show that's with all types of entertainment and humor, motivation and advocacy, and mainly our life hacks and tips. And we're able to do that by having amazing guest experts and guest advocates from the countries we work with, the States, the United Kingdom, and Canada coming in and joining us for these shows. So today, I'm so excited to bring on another one of our InvisiYouth Global Brand Leaders from across the pond over in the UK. Her name is Amy Saunders. She's a British blogger from York, England, and a recent university graduate, and the creator of Blogging in Bed, which is an online community of hundreds of international bloggers, all writing about their health journey as young adults, mainly of which many of them deal with experiences of being homebound or bedbound at different points in their life. Amy has used her experience living with a chronic illness called ME, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis. Yes, I wrote out the phonetic spelling for that one. To motivate an entire generation of older youth living with all types of chronic illnesses that are often homebound, like I had mentioned, so they can be able to express themselves, advocate, and connect with others, as well as use their writing to inspire and motivate other people in similar situations by sharing their own blogs with each other. So welcome, Amy. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. We're so excited to have you on. So I wanted to give you the mic for a little bit so you can tell our listeners all about you and the work that you do and your health journey, and a little bit more about Blogging in Bed.
So yeah, I'm Amy. I've just finished an English language and linguistics degree in York, and I've been diagnosed with ME for coming up 4 years actually. And can I just say, I'm really impressed that you can actually say myalgic. I still can't say it. So
full phonetic spelling. I have to be honest. If you looked at the cue cards, it was full phonetic spelling.
Well, hats off to you because I can't say it. No, I started blogging, I think, coming up 3 years ago. So I'd had ME for about a year, and I'd had glandular fever about 2 years before I got diagnosed with ME. So my official diagnosis is post-glandular fever chronic fatigue syndrome, which is such a mouthful, but ME is essentially what it is. And yeah, I started blogging just basically to share my journey really with university and a chronic illness and things like that. And then about a year into blogging, I started the Blogging in Bed community. So I started that as a Facebook group for people, bloggers with chronic illnesses, to come together and share their posts together. And then it's kind of just gone from there with a Twitter page and now Instagram. And yeah, I've got quite a little nice community going on.
No, I love it. Just being able to see the amount of people from all different countries that support one another and the work that each other does and their writing has been a really great experience, especially because it's a community that oftentimes people don't literally get to see these young people because of where they're at, and then also the young people like yourself get to really impact a whole group and help one another out. So it's a really great community. So definitely for people, definitely check it out. They have their own hashtag, so you can definitely, and the name is really catchy too. That's what I jumped at right away when I found out about Amy.
Well, I think the name, because my blog's Living with ME, so that's like my personal story. And then Blogging in Bed, I just thought most of the time when I'm blogging, it's from my bed, because it's when I'm not feeling very well and I want to share how I'm feeling and what I'm dealing with. And so 9 times out of 10, I'm blogging from my bed. So I thought, well, most other people with chronic illnesses who are blogging are probably blogging from their beds too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works quite well.
I love it. I love it. So, Amy, like all of our other shows, they are segment based. So we go through fun and life hack types of segments so we can go through the show and learn different fun things about you and the work that you do, and then provide some empowerment and advocacy tips and life hacks for our listeners and viewers. So I'm going to get into our first segment with you, and that's called Remember the Last Time.
Remember the last time. Do you remember the last time? Remember.
Okay, so with Remember the Last Time, this segment is, just as the name states, it's all about the things that our guest has done last. So both fun and insightful, and it's a way for our listeners and viewers, both on iTunes and YouTube, can really gain some knowledge about Amy and the work that she does, as well as young adult life with chronic illness. So, Amy, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, Amy, do you remember the last person you took a call from?
Probably, it was yesterday, so it's probably my boyfriend Angus or my mum. One of the two. I don't really speak to anybody else, let's be honest. It's one of the two of them.
Okay, if you had to put 5 people at your last supper, dead or alive, who would they be?
I'm probably going to stick close to home and say my family. So, my mum and dad, my boyfriend Angus, and maybe my grandma, because she died a couple of years ago.
Oh,
so that would be quite cool.
I love it.
I don't know. Yeah. So that's 3. No, that's 4.
That's
I've got
4.
one more. We'll say my granddad as well.
There we go. No, I'll put him there too. We'll put him there. What was the last donation that you or your family made to a charity?
A few weeks ago, I organised a charity ball for my course, and so we were raising money for Hearing Dogs, which is a charity to help deaf people with dogs. I'm not quite sure how it all works, but it's quite big with our school at university.
Yeah.
So yeah, we raised money for them.
That's nice. That's nice. I love that. So what was the last fun purchase you think you made?
Fun purchase. What counts as fun?
Something like
like
non-school or
makeup?
medical related, like things that you just bought for you.
I did that. Tarte had a good deal on their website a few weeks ago, so I did. I've got a load of makeup from Tarte. That was probably my last
Cool.
properly fun purchase.
Cool.
Do you like makeup?
What was the last time you gave advice to a friend or a fellow blogger going through a health struggle?
Trying to think. None of my friends really have health issues.
Well, then, just the last time you gave advice to any of your friends.
Probably when we were all doing our dissertations, and I feel like all of me and my friends were all just so stressed with dissertation and university and getting like everything done. So it's probably then just like trying to calm people down with anxiety and stress related to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you can look at it in hindsight because you're a university graduate now.
No, as of 3 weeks this week.
What was the last topic you advocated for?
Invisible illness is my main one.
Mm-hmm.
I occasionally write about mental health, but that's not really my main struggle. So it probably would be the fact that my illness especially is invisible. Is a big topic for me.
Okay. What about the last major topic that you wrote about or that you saw a lot of people in blogging in bed writing about? What was like the last major topic you remember?
A lot of people have been talking about they've been giving sort of the differences between what you can see and what you can't see. So there's a really amazing blogger called Ali Helmsley, I think she's called.
Yes, she follows us too, yeah.
Yeah, so she's been doing a lot of almost like before and after, but then not before and after. It's the same picture, and she's been putting like what you can see is like a healthy bright, bubbly girl, then what you can't see is the chronic pain, chronic fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, panic attacks, and all of that. And so I think that's been quite popular at the moment, just showing that even though someone can be smiling and can look really nice and healthy, doesn't actually mean that they are. So that's been quite a big topic, I think, recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of stems us right into our second segment for the show, because our first headline will be talking about invisible illnesses. So our next segment we'll be doing with Amy is medical pop headlines.
Medical pop headlines, medical pop headlines, medical pop headlines, medical pop.
Okay, so for medical pop headlines, we go through some of the biggest stories in entertainment and pop culture that relate to our theme of invisible illnesses, and then we get to chat with our guest about the story and how it can impact young adults. So if you're on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see I'm holding up different headline graphics. If you're on iTunes, make sure you pop over to our YouTube channel as well, and so you can see it. So our first story is sort of universally known for the last about 8 or 9 months in the young adult healthcare community. It's singer and actress Selena Gomez. She, a couple years ago, came out discussing that she has lupus, but last fall she revealed over the summer in 2017 that she had a kidney transplant as part of her living with lupus, and also she recently, her donor, who is a friend of hers, Francisa Raices, who is an actress on a TV show called Grownish, she also revealed actually a couple months ago to Self magazine how the two of them have not only healed physically from being a donor, and then also Selena Gomez with her lupus journey and receiving a new kidney, but also the two of them dealing with the emotional mental health side of it and going through therapy and talking about the depression element that they've both had to struggle with after this major surgery. So, Amy, I wanted to talk to you about this because once Selena Gomez sort of came out with lupus, and especially with the kidney transplant she had, it really pushed into the forefront a lot of young adults, especially those that followed us, being really impressed by a young musician and actress really talking about an invisible illness, because people were always very curious about her living with lupus because they never could see, in quotes, sort of the symptoms that she was dealing with internally because it was an invisible illness, and having a kidney transplant was something very visible. She now has a scar. She had photos from being in the hospital and surgery. So how do you think her invisible illness really plays out to the media and how they might have reacted to her having lupus and her kidney surgery?
I think she's done so well to actually come forward, because I think for someone with such a huge presence and huge following, it must have been so difficult for her to actually be completely honest. But at the same time, it's so important that she has done that to make people aware, because obviously everyday people don't have the following to actually raise awareness, but she has this amazing platform that she can share these things, and it just means that other people can think, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it, kind of thing. And I think it's such an amazing thing that she's done to share it with everybody, even though it must have been so difficult, because, as you say, the media will have jumped on it, and I can't imagine what kind of pressure she's been put under to share it. But I'm really glad that she has, because I think it'll have made such a difference to so many people with her sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big thing, too, is because we'll always say with the charity, people sort of share their health journey differently. Some people are very private and other people are very public, as you know, even with blogging in bed. And Selena Gomez has sort of remained a little more private about what she goes through on a daily basis. Yeah. So I thought she's like a really strong example of, you can even come forward and mention the health struggles you deal with on an invisible illness, but it doesn't have to be sort of the daily defining factor of your day.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think she's done it. She's got a nice balance. She's sort of acknowledged that, okay, something's not right. There's things happening, but she doesn't need to go into detail of every awful thing that she's got to endure. People know and aware and can support her, but she's not sort of bearing all and saying this is what's happening on a daily basis, which I think for someone with such a big platform would be quite intense to sort of share the ins and outs of her life, because it's already documented so finely from the media. She doesn't need everybody else finding out all about sort of the ins and outs of all her different symptoms, because that would be very intense. So I think she's got quite a good balance of sharing and raising awareness, but not going too much into detail, and keeping her private life private, which I think is very important when you're struggling with an illness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask too, because she's also been very open about the sort of mental, emotional health side of dealing with an invisible illness. And even her friend coming forward, who obviously was very involved, Francisa, in her journey, obviously donating a kidney for her, but sort of the two of them going through the talk therapy route of the emotional struggles they had Selena dealing with an invisible illness. How do you think that really impacts a lot of other young people when they're able to see somebody recognizing that it's not just physical health? A lot of times your physical health affects your emotional well-being too.
Oh, I think it's so important. I think anybody who thinks that your mental health wouldn't be affected if you're ill is, well, just stupid. I think anybody can struggle with mental health problems, whether you're ill or not. And then if you've got a chronic illness, and then with all the pressure that she's under anyway, with her job and everything, it's no surprise that she struggles with her mental health. And I think it's so important for her to acknowledge that, and say, look, I'm not always happy and smiley and bubbly. I do have horrible days when I don't want to get out of bed and, everything's going wrong, but that's part of life. And I think it's important to sort of say that it's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just, that's what happens. If you've got a chronic illness, life isn't fun sometimes, and your mental health will struggle because of it, and that's fine. That is okay. I don't think you should be embarrassed for that. And I think she's a perfect example of pointing that out and raising that awareness that you shouldn't be embarrassed if you're struggling with your mental health.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that's a really strong point, is that it is part of the journey. And like people say, it's okay to not be okay all the time. So she's a really strong example of that. So I was glad to bring up her headline. And another one that's a little more close to home for Amy, I had to bring up somebody British, obviously. So many of you non-Brits will know this next actress, Martine McCutcheon, from Love Actually. Yes, she's played opposite Hugh Grant in that movie. But for a lot of British people, they'll also know her from being a former cast member of EastEnders, which is a British soap. So actually, she recently came into the news last month as well, because she's releasing new music, but she opened up a lot. She lives with ME, which is the same chronic illness that Amy lives with. Oh my Lord. So I'm already brain fogging. That Amy lives with, but she also, a little over a year ago, revealed that she also then got diagnosed with Lyme disease. So she was recently in the media talking about how that impacted her work and her relationships with her husband, having children really was able to help her move forward and help herself even more. So she talked a lot about recently about not wanting to burden the people around her by talking a lot about what she was struggling with her Lyme disease and ME, and how it's been sort of actually her husband and her family and her now her new her children sort of coming forward and really helping her out every day and what she needs and asking for what she needs, that she's been able to now sort of make a comeback, and now she's making new music, and her talking about how important it was for them to be supportive of her every day. So I really wanted to kind of bring her up, Amy, because I know she's been very open about living with ME and Lyme in the UK press for a few years now, but her also coming forward now talking a lot about how she didn't want to be a burden, and how it really was her husband sort of coming forward and saying, we're in this together, we're going to work through it, and always asking what she needed and how he could help. How is that sort of really impactful for a lot of other young people to know that they can rely and lean on their support systems more often?
I think because I watched a clip from Momin, which I'm obsessed with, and that's how I found out that she had ME. And she was, as you said, she was saying about, she said at one point that she told her husband that he could leave and go and start a family with somebody else because she loved him so much. She didn't want to hold him back and stop him from having that option of having a family and finding love and doing all the things that she couldn't do. And obviously he stuck by her and said, no, we're going through this together. And I think that just shows that it's not just one person going through it. If you've got an illness, it's not just you that's going through it. It's your family and your friends and your loved ones that also have to go through it at the same time. But she's a perfect example of the fact that can happen. You don't have to be on your own. You can lean on the people that are closest to you, and if they really care about you, they will do anything to support you. And I think that gave a lot of hope to people who were maybe in similar situations, who didn't like to burden their partners or anything. I mean, I've been there. I don't like burdening my family and friends, but you know, the people who will stick by you will stick by you, and the people who won't, well, they weren't that close to you anyway. So, and I think Martine has done a really good job of highlighting the fact that it is okay to ask for help, and it is okay to lean on someone that you love, if they're willing to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved that she, especially in this article, she talked a lot about the fact that because her illnesses are both invisible, her husband really took on the role of always asking if he thought something was wrong. He always would take that initiative to ask what she needed and sort of giving her the control back of being able to explain what she needed so he could help. So I do think she's a really strong example of sort of continuing to push for visibility in invisible illness, and then pushing to not only remain and contain her friendships and her relationships, and for people to support her, but also find a way to balance her health with building her career back again. So I think that's wonderful for her. So kudos to Martine again. So after our pop headlines section, we're going to go into one that's more on motivation and providing some empowerment and advocacy hacks with Amy. So our next section is going to be called Path to Power.
Path to Power.
In our Path to Power segment, we get to talk about teaching all of our young adults and their supporters how to own their health journey with power, especially because for invisible illness, it's a journey that not everyone can see. So we get to discuss how to create that power in each day and how to make invisible illness matter to the people that are around you. So it's a big sort of life tip, life hack section of our show. So, Amy, I wanted to ask, how do you think youth can find their own strength and power in themselves while they're working on their health every day? And it is sort of a dual process of empowering yourself, but also wanting to maintain your health too.
I think for young people, it's so hard because you're still learning who you are and learning who your friends are and working out what you want to do with your life and stuff. And I think a big thing is to just take each day as it comes. I think for me, I was very focused on, well, this time next year I want to do that, and then this time in 5 years I want to be doing this, and that's not necessarily realistic if you've got an invisible illness. Mm-hmm. So I think for the youth, like the younger people with chronic illness, I think it's so important to just take each day, each week, each month as it comes, and you know, if you can do something great and celebrate that and embrace it, and if you can't, just think, okay, not today. And I think it's such a learning curve to just be able to accept your illness. But I think when you're younger, that's the main thing that you need to focus on, is just accepting it. Because as soon as I'd accepted it, I felt a lot better with my mental health, physically. Everything kind of just fell into place once I'd started to accept what I was going through. And I think that's a big struggle with the younger. And obviously, as soon as you can accept it, you can kind of take control of what you're feeling as well, you know. So yeah, that's probably the main thing.
Yeah, I was even going to say when you said accepting it, because that's a big, it's a big long journey. Even for my own health journey, it takes a long time. And even we'll always say with InvisiYouth that accepting it doesn't mean that you're not going to still sort of fight for your recovery. And for some circumstances, they can have a cure if they're going through that process. Other people, it is a lifelong illness they'll deal with, but you can still sort of better your health. And once you sort of accept that it's part of your new norm, you can sort of build a new norm within it. So exactly what you said really does make a lot of sense too.
Yeah. I think once you've accepted it, the problem is when you've just been diagnosed and you're fighting it, you can't take control of it because you're not working with it, you're working against it, and you just end up feeling worse, and it's a spiral downwards where as soon as you start to accept it and sort of almost embrace it, what you're feeling, you can then start working with your illness, and so you can find ways to actually cope with it and do better things with it, and take control and get the power back. Basically, a big thing for me was getting the power back, because obviously once you've got a chronic illness, you feel like you've lost control, you've lost the power, and once you've accepted it, I think that's a big turning point. And it does take a long time to accept things. I feel like I'm still accepting it now, but
yeah, and it's not knowing it's not like flipping a switch too. It's like you can accept parts of it. Like a lot for people, it's sort of the different physical limitations they might have. It's sort of accepting. I always say it's like every day is a different type of acceptance, because sometimes your symptoms affect you differently. You know that as well. So it's sort of, okay, this is what my health can let me do today. So then I'm going to accept that and I'm going to work with it. Which people who are healthy and able-bodied too, they have sort of outside circumstances that are out of their control that can affect what they're doing. It's similar. An interesting example is we'll say to some people, well, it's like your friend, if they have to get to work but their car broke down, they're out of control of how that happens, but they have to sort of work around that issue and still get on with their day. So your health is sort of that sort of roadblock every day that you have to kind of embrace, that you'll always find on your drive, but you just have to find different ways to work around it, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so for you, what do you think about, because I know you're very open with the blogging in bed community, and then a lot of other young people you've met about your health. So for you, how do you find that process of becoming comfortable opening up about your health, and sort of like you said, when you started blogging, it was sort of under your name, people knew it was you. So how did you find the different steps that you would give to other people that want to try to become a little more open in discussing their health with family and friends?
I think for me, because I've done it through my blog, it's almost like there's still like a barricade there. So it's like my family and friends can read it if they want to, but they don't have to. So it's kind of like giving them that option to ignore it if they can't deal with it and they don't want to know. Then I'm not going to judge them for that. They've got their own problems, and it means they don't have to read it. But my family and friends who do want to know and do want to see how I'm doing, and do it, kind of like the blog is that way for them to find out without being too sort of intimate. Like if they feel a bit awkward, because I know some of my friends at university, they've like read my blog from afar, and I didn't even realize they read it until like there was a couple that told me like 2 months ago that they've read my blog basically like all the way through university, and I never knew that. Oh,
that's so funny.
But, like, because they felt too uncomfortable like coming to me and asking me like outright, like, what's ME, like, how do you deal with this, like, how are you feeling, but they still wanted to like check in with me. So it's like a way for them to do that. And I think for me, sharing it, like, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, there's a lot that I don't share, which naturally a lot of chronic illness bloggers, there'll be a lot with a lot of us that we don't share, but a lot of we do try and share. And I think I started blogging because I couldn't relate to anybody. I didn't know anybody that had ME, really. There was maybe 1 or 2 people that I knew, but I wasn't like best friends with them. I couldn't sort of be completely open and honest with them. And so I kind of wanted to just rant, really. That was it. And I didn't have anybody to do that with, that other than my mum. But, and I thought blogging was the perfect way. I did English language. I like writing. That's my thing. So it was a perfect way for me to just sort of get everything off my chest and just sort of word vomit, essentially. And then it just ended up being like a platform that I could sort of share tips and things about it. And I don't know, I never really started blogging with the intention to grow a sort of community. Like it was purely just for me to just word vomit essentially, and then it's just kind of escalated. But I think if you were wanting to start doing something, just start off slow. Like even just getting a Twitter account and just sharing things on Twitter, that is like one step towards it. And then if you're comfortable with that, then you maybe start an Instagram and share pictures. And then if you're comfortable with that, then you can start a blog. If you don't want to jump straight into the blog, I mean, I did the blog first and then everything else followed, because I didn't realize that it was such a big thing. Like I didn't actually realize social media and blogging went together. I was quite naive. I didn't really know how it all worked. But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people who have Twitter, but they don't have blogs, and they talk about their chronic illness and the mental health and things on Twitter or Instagram, but they don't blog. So there are ways for you to share what you're feeling without sort of being too personal or too in depth or having to write whole blog posts. You know, you just got to find what works for you and just sort of dip your toe in. And you know, if you don't like doing it, then you can delete your account, you can take your blog down or whatever. Or if you don't want to do it with your own name, do it under a pseudonym. You know, you can come up with a name, and you don't have to have your personal name on the blog or on Instagram at all. You can stay completely private, so none of your family and friends would even know that you're doing it. If that's what you wanted. I think there's so many different ways for you to explore sharing your journey without needing to be so upfront about it. And it's completely up to the individual.
Yeah, and I love how you said that even you've had friends that were even looking at your blog and not even mentioning it to you. And I imagine that we would always say, if you are sort of wanting to sort of own your story and own your health and gain a lot of power back, because a lot of decisions for young people with invisible illnesses and chronic illnesses, they have to be made for them, because they're not of age yet, because they're not 18 at some circumstances, but also because their families are still very involved in their health, and a lot of doctors are still making decisions on what's best for your health. So there's a lack of control in your health journey, because other people are dictating a lot of what's best for you. So for a lot of young people, I think it's great that your friends, even they would probably be two of the friends that you've had that were the most supportive in a way that you didn't even realize, because they probably they knew from your own words what were issues that you dealt with or things you may have liked or not liked or had to adapt in your day to day. So they were able to sort of cater their friendship to you by even knowing what was going on. And so that's a great way of even giving the power back to yourself, of being able to know, I can start an Instagram or a Twitter account for my health. I can start one that has 0 photos on Instagram, but all I do is just follow everyone I can find who has similar illnesses. I can follow a charity like InvisiYouth that has that's beyond geographic borders, that has all different illnesses and disabilities brought in together, and you can kind of find your own niche and find your voice, because that's a big thing for young people, is that they have a voice. It's just sort of finding the direction they want to use it. So I think a lot of what you said was perfect, and I do kudos to your friends for reading your blog too, and without telling you. That's a great sort of side note.
Well, I think the great thing is that they've come forward, because I did a new theme, and I was so excited about it, and I was telling everyone, I was like, I don't even care, because you probably don't even read my blog, but I'm going to show you anyway because I'm so excited. And they're like, oh no, I read all your posts. I'm like, what?
You're like, oh wait, have I written something?
Like, what have I written? What have you read?
I love that. I love that. I love that you're providing a lot of tips in this section too about people finding their voice and power. So that kind of leads us into our next segment, which I know Amy is going to thrive in, because she does this all the time in her blog. This is called Health Hack Moments.
Health Hack Moments.
All right, in our health hack moments, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's one of our funniest and most impactful parts of the show, where our guests talk about some of those medical moments that they've faced, and really, exactly like the topic says, they provide themselves health hacks and what ways they've adapted to their health. So for a lot of young people, you learn from each other. We learn from a lot of the young adults that support our charity, that are our global brand leaders like Amy. So our health hack moments is a really big way for us to provide some lifestyle tips and life hacks for all of you guys. So Amy, I wanted to ask for you, what about when you're dealing obviously with an invisible illness? It's not something that your family and friends can see a lot of times. So for you, how do your family and friends react when you do really need to sort of take a health hack moment for yourself? How do they like to help you? Do they ignore? Do they like asking a lot of questions?
No, I think most of my family and friends are really good, actually. One example was I went to Edinburgh in April as like a university trip. We were all going and presenting in this conference, and Edinburgh is very hilly. There was walking everywhere, and a lot of the time I ended up having to get taxis because I was just too exhausted, and there was so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I need to conserve my energy as much as possible. So to do that, instead of walking up, 3 hills, I'll get a taxi. And like most of the taxis were no more than £5. And I said to my friends, look, anytime that I need a taxi, like, I'll pay for it. I don't mind, but you guys can come in with me because I don't want to go on my own. And they were so supportive. And in fact, I didn't end up paying for hardly any of the taxis. I paid for 1 or 2, but basically any time we got in one, someone different would pay. And so it meant such a lot to me that they were supportive, and they didn't, none of them said like, oh, can you not just walk? Like, come on, like, just walk. None of them said that to me. Every time I said, can we get a taxi? They were like, yeah, no, that's fine, we'll call one, or, oh, I'll pay for this one, or we'll split this one, or whatever. And that meant so much to me, because for them, it would have been so much easier for them to just quickly walk, because then they would have saved money. They would have got there probably faster.
Yeah.
But, they understood that for me, I needed to conserve energy, and that meant the absolute world to me. But, and so a lot of my family and friends are the same. If I need, it's mainly conserving energy for me. And if I'm too exhausted, it's getting a taxi or sitting down for a bit. And most people that I'm out with are completely understanding of that, and just think, okay, yeah, just take 5, just sit down on the bench and we'll take 5 and then we'll carry on. And they're great. So nobody really ignores it.
Mm-hmm.
They might not sort of ask in detailed questions of what's going on, but if I say, can I just take 5, they just, yeah, let's sit down, that's fine. So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And a big thing that you pointed out is like what I'll always suggest, and a lot of us at InvisiYouth will suggest to young people as sort of a health hack, is that your friends and family, they'll know if you're asking for their sort of participation, if you will, in your health hack. Like, you involved your friends. You didn't say, okay, well, I need the taxi for my own health, but you guys can walk, I'll meet you there. You sort of involved them in it. So it became sort of part of their day in a way.
Yeah.
They sort of will then take more of the lead and the initiative to then be part of the health journey with you. And we do have, especially with young people and their friends, sometimes they'll want to ask questions. It's always the why factor. We'll always say they'll want to know why, and then they'll ask a lot of questions, which is fine, and then you can sort of gain control about whether or not you want to answer it. But like you said, a lot of times it's just sort of taking that initiative to going, hey guys, I need to do this for my health right now, to sort of get through the day. Do you mind? I'll either do it by myself or you guys can join in. So it gives your friends kind of the initiative to sort of make decisions too. And that's a big thing we'll always say is being a little more assertive on that end of sort of bringing your friends and family in on your health hacks is great in your day to day, because then they'll be able to, they don't feel like they have to sort of turn the eye to it because they can't see what's affecting you, but they're being involved in it. And then that's a big way that they'll either be able to help you more often in the future, because then they might go, oh, okay, this looks like we're going to need to do something again like the last time. And then they'll take an initiative with you and ask, checking in, how are you feeling? So that's a big tip.
That's it. And I think also with, especially like family, for me, my mum kind of knows when I'm struggling. She can tell just by looking at me. Like, I don't even need to speak in the morning. She'll just know how I'm feeling. But with friends, you just have to be vocal with them. And if they know that if you're struggling, you'll tell them, then they don't need to worry about not knowing, if that makes sense. Where if you're someone who never tells them, then they'll in their head think, well, is she struggling? Is she just hiding it? Is she just not telling us, or is she okay? Where I think I don't sort of, if I'm at university and I'm not feeling great, but it doesn't doesn't affect anybody, then obviously I'm not going to start saying like, oh, I feel horrible. But you know, when I know that I need help, I try and be vocal and say, look, I need to get a taxi, that, you know, this is what I need to do, I need to sit down. And my friends then know that I'll tell them when I need help, so they don't need to worry if I don't need help. You know, does that make sense?
No, it does, absolutely. And I think that is a big tip, is knowing that you have the control to ask for help, and just even involving your friends verbally and sort of giving them the cue. It's you're the one that's dealing with the invisible illness, so you're the one that gets to control how people are involved or not in what health hacks you have to do to sort of get through the day with them. And I think that, especially for friends, that's a big thing, because they don't see you all day, every day. So it's a big thing for them. Absolutely. They don't see you when you're struggling with friends. You know, most of the time they only see me when I'm doing well. So, you know, all of a sudden if I'm on a trip with them, then they see me all day, every day. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, she does struggle a lot more than I might realize. And you know, if you're vocal with them, I know my friends would be supportive. None of them would turn around and be like, no, we're not sitting down with you. No, you've got to keep going. Like, I know they'd be supportive, but they don't know that I'll need help unless I tell them. So yeah, and a big thing like that is that those are your more genuine friends. We'll always say, especially with young people, they don't want to lose any of their friends that they have, or make their friends that are healthy, able-bodied, sort of in air quotes, uncomfortable, so they don't say anything, and then they don't use any health hacks that they might have for themselves, and then they end up, their health suffers the most. And so we'll always say with the charity too, is that the people who want to stick around, even if they've never once asked a question. I have friends of mine that were with me and knew me in school since day one when I was 16 and got injured and dealt with my chronic illnesses from then. They never asked me a question, even to this day. They just sort of they'll know, and they'll be like, are you doing something right now? Because they'll just know I'll start pulling out K-tape from my bag, and I'll have to start putting it on my foot or my wrist so I can move. It'll be July, and I'm taking Hot Pocket pads out and putting them into my pockets because my hand is numb and I need the heat to sort of bring it back to my hand. They don't ask questions. I think they get very confused with the medical jargon, but they'll just be like, oh, okay, you need to do something right now. And then they'll be like, well, do you want me to talk about something else? And they'll just ignore it. But I've had friends who don't get involved. And then those are the friends that aren't around anymore, but I wouldn't want them around anymore.
That's the thing. I think with younger people, I mean, whether you've got a health problem or not, you go through so many friends when you're growing up, and as harsh as it might sound, you will not going to stay friends with the same people that you grew up with. You know, most people get new friends and lose friends, and you know, and then when you've got a health problem, you don't want friends around you who aren't going to support you and who aren't going to try and understand it. You know, you need people who are more than willing to support you. And, you know, if that means losing a few friends, then it's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Even though it's hard at the time. And at the time, you question everything. You're like, have I just been an awful person? But you quite honestly, if it was meant to be, it would be fine. And if you're losing friends, that you're losing them for a reason.
Yeah. And
that's fine. You just, again, it's all about accepting it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, too, because I know you mentioned that a lot of times in university that your friends wouldn't see if you were going through sort of a health struggle because you would sort of be away from them. You'd be home or in your room at your university. So what are some life hacks, sort of health hacks that you have in your back pocket when you were in the school setting, when you were feeling more of the health struggles of living with ME? I know for me, a lot of it was more speaking to our university about getting accommodations, because sometimes it would affect my ability to walk or write. So I had note takers, or I could have tape recorders in class that I would ask for. The only person who knew was a professor. Sometimes I was told I could leave class early or walk in late because I wouldn't be able to use my leg because of the nerve damage. So I would have to get a ride there from security, which was always fun, in their little truck with the blue light. I want to ask on your end, because a big thing that you do with your blog is talking about tips. So what are some major ones that you've used during your university years?
So I don't know what it's like in America, but for the UK, we can apply for something called the Disabled Students Allowance if you're going to university. And so that was a big help for me. And I know they get quite a lot of stick, and they're not perfect, but nothing is. But for me, I got a mentor, sort of, was it I think an hour a week through university term time, which basically was to help me manage my time. So we'd sit down and we'd go through what I was struggling with, what assignments I had, and coming up with a time management plan. And found out actually after my last session that she had ME as well, so she knew exactly how I was doing all the way through, and I never even knew that she had ME, but obviously because she couldn't tell me. And so that was a massive help, having my mentor, because it meant if I was having a really, really bad week, I could just go to her and she would sort of calm me down, or, you know, talk me through some ideas. You know, she would say, like, right, go and speak to this person, or go and speak to that person, we can sort that out. So I got that. I also got a load of computer software that I got, which I never ended up using because didn't really need it. Honestly don't even know what half.
I was going to say, are we tech savvy, Amy? Because I'm certainly not.
No, not with. Well, I was supposed to have training, but the training was like 3 hours long at a time, and I'm like, mate, I've got a chronic illness. Like, I cannot sit and do 3 hours worth of training. No, thank you. So I didn't do the training. Didn't know how to use half of it. I've managed to do the degree without it, so obviously wasn't that important. But a lot of people can get, depending on the severity of your illness, you can get note takers, and you can get a lot of support. I got extra time in my assignments. I got time breaks on any exams. So all of my tutors would get a learning support plan that I'd been sort of given, essentially, which basically just outlined everything I would struggle with, and like what symptom would cause difficulty for what thing. So say I had a 2-hour seminar or a 2-hour lecture, the lecturer would make sure that I would have a break halfway through. It wasn't just me, they would just kind of give everybody a break halfway through, so you could have a wander around, or just sort of switch off for 5 minutes. So I think the main thing, if you're going to university or any school, is just be completely honest with them, because if you're struggling and you don't tell them why you're struggling, they're not going to know. So it's being completely honest, and most universities and schools, I think, are more than accommodating, and will try and do anything to help you, because at the end of the day, they want you to do well, and so they'll accommodate for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like what you said too, because we will have similar services in the United States too, even from in high school, which is like secondary schooling for you guys, and then going into universities across the states, and even in our friends in Canada too. It's just being able to, you don't have to, I always, for a big thing that we'll say with the charity is, it's the teachers, the professors that need to know, you give information on a need-to-know basis. You don't even need to, especially in the States, you don't even need to disclose what your diagnosis is. It's just they know you're coming in with disability services or assistant or educational support in any capacity. So they don't even need to, it's your ability as the person with a health struggle, especially with an invisible illness, it's your decision whether or not to disclose it, but they have to abide by what you're given as accommodations and support. So that gives a lot of control to young people, because a big thing is they're afraid that the entire class will know, and then all of their teachers will start to judge it. So I think that's a big thing to know as a health hack, is to ask for the support in the school setting, because then they're able to sort of accommodate and cushion that whole environment for you to work for your health. So a lot of the tips that you gave were really great. I know that works really well in the States too, is especially if you're touring universities or transferring, or even in high schools, it's just sort of asking your teachers, going, hey, I really think I'm going to need certain accommodations because of an illness that I have. Who would I go to? And then you can bring in your parents, guardians, and then really figure out what the school can offer. I always joke, we don't spend all that time in doctors' offices, guys, to not be able to get your doctors to help you out when it comes to the school environment.
Exactly.
You spend so many hours with those doctors, they should at least be able to help you out getting help on a test. Like, that's like the least they can do after all the stuff you go through medically.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was really lucky, because there was a couple of tutors that sort of did know the ins and outs of my illness, and they would always ask how I was doing. And what one tutor said to me, because I ended up not using an extension for an assignment, and he basically was like, I am a little bit disappointed in your grade. I think you could have done better. He said, I noticed that you didn't use your extension. And I was like, oh no, I didn't need it. He was like, you've got it for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Use it.
There we go. I love that.
Like, it didn't exactly say like you would have done better had you used your extension, but it was kind of there. And since then, and because I always felt guilty using my extensions, like obviously I had it, and I was like, but I feel like I've got an unfair advantage to people who haven't got extensions. And this tutor was essentially like, you've got the extensions for a reason. Use them. Like that, it's fair to use them, and then you'll do the best you can because you've got the extensions. So I was like, yeah, thanks. That's literally exactly what I needed to hear, to just like reassure me that it was okay to need that extra time.
Yeah.
No, like my university and for me, were very, very supportive, and I'm sure it's just a case of you know, vocalizing what you need. They can't help you if they don't know about it.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I think that's a really, really strong point, and it kind of leads us to our last segment as well. So we're going to go into our final segment of the show with Amy. It's called In an Ideal World. With the In an Ideal World segment, we often talk about, in a lot of communities, about trying to improve society, change stigmas, and make the world more inclusive, especially for young people dealing with invisible illnesses. So we all can't move those massive boulders by ourselves. And in this segment, we talk about not only what an ideal world would be like for those living with invisible illnesses, but what are some ways that we would want to see some change. So Amy, I want to ask, how would you feel you would want invisible illnesses discussed more, or how you would want the media to discuss invisible illnesses in an ideal world?
I just think that sort of invisible illnesses doesn't need to be a taboo subject, and I feel like at the moment it is still quite a taboo subject, and I just don't think it needs to be. If someone doesn't want to discuss their invisible illnesses, no one's going to force them. They can completely keep it to themselves. But the people who do want to discuss it and do want to raise awareness, it's almost like I sometimes feel embarrassed about the fact that I do blog about it and I do share sort of the ins and outs of my personal life, and people like my friends and family will remind me like, no, you're doing it but to raise awareness. Like you're not doing it for sympathy, you're doing it to raise awareness. But I think there's still a big thing about invisible illnesses, that it should just be kept invisible. And the whole point of doing the blog, and for a lot of people, is so that they're not invisible. Like, we're taking the invisible out of it. We're showing people that just because you can't see it doesn't mean someone's not struggling. And I think that's such a big thing. It's breaking that barrier that it shouldn't be talked about, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean we can't discuss it, and we can't talk about it, and we can't share what we're feeling. I just think the whole sort of awkwardness around the subject needs to be taken away, and so people don't assume that you're healthy just because you look it. And I think as soon as people start to accept that you can be ill but still be a young, bright, bubbly young girl or boy or whatever, I feel like people are going to be so much better off, because you're no longer then fighting for fairness, essentially, and you know, getting judged for wanting to sit down when you're actually ill just because you look fine. I think as soon as that stigma goes around invisible illnesses and the fact that people are just lazy, I think it's going to make such a difference.
Yeah, and I do think that would especially, because we'll always say is that we can always talk about breaking stigmas, and obviously illness is all in all shapes and forms, and it affects all people. It doesn't discriminate based on gender or race or anything, and so it really can affect anyone. But we'll always say that we have to kind of work in the framework of stigmas still being around, because if we wait for the stigmas to go away, you won't be able to remove sort of that taboo feeling. So we'll always say is that having people like yourself, like InvisiYouth, that are just sort of embracing the invisible. We'll always say even with young adults in healthcare, they're very invisible, hence the name InvisiYouth. We don't want young adults to feel that because they're not little kids in the commercials, or they're not grown adults in adult healthcare, because they're in this invisible middle crack of the community as teenagers and young adults, that you that they don't have a voice and they don't have a right to use their voice. We always say that we'll encourage them that, no, you speak up and talk about what you want to talk about. That's the biggest thing, is that because invisible illness is unseen to the physical body, that you are reliant on your voice. So that is even more empowering to young people to find the ways they want to talk about it, whether it's in their activities, whether it's in writing, whether it's verbally advocating. Those are just finding different ways to harness your voice, because not only are young adults needing to be empowered, but by using your voice, then you can talk about something that you can't see. And it's just really just be kinder to people, I think, is a big...
Yeah, that's it.
Because even your friends that might not have any health struggles or have an invisible illness, if you're just sort of universally nicer to all of your friends and more compassionate just to ask how they're doing all the time, you'll be able to then, when your friend might have an invisible illness, it'll be more receptive, because you're kind of always asking how other people are doing, and then you would just be asking the one friend who has a diagnosis of an invisible illness.
That's the thing. And I think, because I mean, it's getting slightly better. I think people are becoming more understanding. Like now, if I say to someone, I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, I've got ME, more people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of that before, or I know what that is. Where a few years ago, if I said that, they'd be like, sorry, what's that? But what does that stand for? Like, what's chronic fatigue syndrome? Is that just being tired? But I think now people are starting to understand more. And I think a big thing is that because there is more awareness being raised, but there's still that sense of, you know, on a bus or on a train, if it's busy and I need to sit down and there's no seats left, I can't bring myself to ask someone, can I sit down, because I'm suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm really exhausted. I feel like my legs are going to collapse at any point, because they can't see it. And I always just feel like they'll judge me and think I'm just being really lazy, and actually that's not the case at all. But because you can't see it, it's that balance, and you know, that's my problem as well as theirs, because I can't bring myself to ask them. But at the same time, if the stigma wasn't there,
you would
I
ask.
wouldn't feel as embarrassed to ask. And it's just that sort of breaking the barrier, so that people with illnesses don't feel embarrassed about having the invisible illnesses and asking for help from people that they don't know. And then people who don't have the illnesses aren't quite as judgmental and shocked if somebody who doesn't look like they're ill tells them that they're ill. I think it goes both ways.
Yeah.
But I found out, I don't know who said it, but someone said that Manchester Airport are starting to do support for people with invisible illnesses.
Hey.
So I can't remember what is exactly, but essentially I think you went to like the customer service desk or something and said like, I've got X, Y and Z, whatever, and they'll give you priority boarding, and they'll like, if you needed a wheelchair, they'd give you a wheelchair, or like fast track through the check-in and stuff, like basically just making your life a lot easier. And
I knew I loved Manchester when I was in England for a reason.
Exactly what we need. Because like everybody knows how stressful airports can be, and how like you can literally be on your feet queuing for hours, like for check-ins, security, then boarding and all sorts, and it's just very stressful, very it takes a lot of energy, and it's very tiring. And I think just Manchester taking that step to support people with invisible illnesses. And basically they're saying, look, if you need help, come and tell us and we'll help you. And I think that's just so amazing. And we could do with a lot more airports and any sort of public transport places doing things like that, just to make it a little bit easier. I mean, can you imagine if you go travelling and you don't have a wheelchair, or you don't have priority boarding or anything, and you're really struggling that day and you're really fatigued, but you've got to travel, just knowing that you can go and be like, oh, can I have a wheelchair to get me from A to B? I mean, that just would relieve so much stress from so many people, and would allow a lot of more people, I think, with invisible illnesses to go travelling and do things that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do because of what they're suffering with. So that's just one example of how sort of the wider community could help.
So we can end that on, in an ideal world, everyone would act like the Manchester Airport.
Yeah, exactly.
That is our ending now.
Every airport, every train station, everyone would have that that option for people.
Every public setting and every group of family and friends should act like that. Basically, that is our end note of in an ideal world. We're shouting out the airports, which I love that. Absolutely, if everyone was more supportive just to everyone, regardless of needing that they visually need the support, then it would just be there. Everyone would just be a lot kinder, and then B, it wouldn't be shocking when someone said they had an invisible illness. It would go, okay, I'm still going to ask how you're doing anyway, but now I know that we might need to ask a couple more questions, or I might need to now ask for a little more help. So I think, like you said, that would be an ideal world. So I think that's actually a perfect way to end the show too, is just shouting out the airports. So, Amy, I'm so happy to have you on the show as one of our guest experts, and especially since you're a global brand leader for InvisiYouth too, I'm so happy about that. But we want to have all of our listeners and viewers be able to find you on social media too. So what are your handles? Where's your blog so people can find you?
So my blog is www.livingwithme.blog, and then my Twitter and Instagram handles are AmyLivingWithMe. And then blogging in bed is the Twitter and Instagram for that is just blogging bed. So you can find me at any of those. And on my blog itself, there's a page about blogging in bed as well. So yeah.
Awesome. And everyone, you can find InvisiYouth on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at InvisiYouth. And you can also find the InvisiYouth chat sessions on YouTube and iTunes. But make sure you subscribe and share these two channels with all of your family and friends so we can continue providing more virtual programming for all of these amazing young adults around the world. So again, I want to thank Amy for being our guest today. And
thank you for having me.
Of course. And then we will see all of you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.